Hello and welcome to day 5 of the 365-day pottery challenge, where I'm going to do pottery outside every day for 365 days. Weather permitting, but not really, because I'm going to do it when the weather's bad too, hopefully. Today we're going to be doing trimming, and I have 3 bowls here, which you can probably see, but I'll hold them up a little better. And these guys are in different states of dryness, which is going to be a good kind of demo of how that works with different states of dryness. And we're going to put some nice feet on the bottom of these guys. So, let's start with this guy. This guy I threw quite a while ago and just forgot that it was there. And I was planning on just doing a kind of hand trimming, just smoothing this edge here, because it's kind of a nice little foot already that I created with the tool. But we're gonna go ahead and trim it up on the wheel anyway. If you look closely, hopefully you can see it's pretty dry up around the rim, so it's a little drier than what we would ideally want, but it's still good for a demo, so you can sort of see the effects of using something that's a little drier. So the first thing we have to do, of course, is recenter this guy. And first let's get our bat on here well. Clean it out a little bit. And if you're using a full-size wheel, you can just remove the bat and do this right on the wheel head. But the first thing you want to do is visually line it up within the concentric circles here. So just get it as close as you can. Oh, I forgot to make sure that my wheel was working. Yes, it's working. Get my clay out of my pocket here. There we go. And there are a couple of ways to recenter this. It's very important to recenter it so that when you carve your foot onto there, you're not carving your foot off center. One way, which I'm not very good at, but is always worth practicing, is to spin the wheel fairly fast. And you're doing what's called tapping. So you can see when I hold my finger here, when it comes off center, right? So what you do is you wait for it to come to you. You can even go slower so you can time it better. But you wait for it to come to you and then tap. Now you can see it's worse. It just takes, it's kind of timing and skill and luck all combined. And basically you're going to put your finger right here to see if it's lined up. Or I like to go right there. That's probably the most reliable spot. That's a little off maybe, but let's see. Let's try one more tap. Whoops. Sometimes you'll just go kind of aggressive and then hope for luck. Something like that. That's not perfect. A couple of ways to test are to take a needle tool and you can draw a little line around, well, let's do it where we're going to put the foot. So right there, you draw a little line, and then you can look at the width here and see if it's off. And that's a little bit off, just barely, so I'll just scooch it this way. And then usually that'll do it. Another way to test is to hold your needle tool, not pointing straight into it, but kind of a light angle with the curve, with the spinning of the wheel. And you can just do like this, and you'll see it. You'll see that the wheel kind of, or the pot kind of pops out and hits the tool. And then you just stop the wheel, find your mark, which is right here, and then you just scooch it away from the mark, and then try again. And in theory, if you have an even pot, you should carve a nice even line all the way around. This pot's not very even, so it's not going to happen. You can also go back to this one and kind of double check that, and that looks pretty decent. And again, this pot's drier than it should be, so it's not going to behave exactly how we would like, but it'll give you a good example of how that goes. I'm going to take just a small ball of clay here, and I'm going to break it into 3 pieces. And I'm going to put a little pressure on top so the pot doesn't move, and I'm just going to press a ball of clay into the bat, or the wheel head. Not into the clay, into the bat. Then I'm going to take a third or second spot, do the same thing, and go for the third side and do the same thing. You can use 4, you can use big logs of clay, whatever makes you feel confident, but this should be enough to do this. And then we'll get it spinning, and we'll get a carving tool out, and we're just going to set the foot in. Oh, and that's actually drier than I thought. So see how it's becoming dust? That's actually too dry, and we don't want to really do that. You don't want to create dust when you're making pottery, because the dust has silica in it and it's not good for you. So what I would do with this then is really just take a sponge, and I would just smooth that up. Smooth up those edges. If there are little chunks that need to be kind of taken off with your thumb or whatever, you can do that. You can use a little bit of water to almost rehydrate it and soften it. And this is really what I planned to do with this pot anyway. And you can see how dry that was. You can still see some of the crumbs. If it comes in crumbs, it's just too dry. Okay, so we'll just do that. Take our little balls of clay off and use them for our next guy. But let's have a look. Didn't take much of just smoothing that edge, and actually I'll need a little more there on that sharp edge. A thumb, finger, or sponge. This is a really smooth sponge from Mud Tools. The white one is really smooth, so it's probably better if you're going to be doing stuff like this than a kind of a rough sponge, because it's going to leave you with a smoother finish. And then I can use my fingers to kind of polish it too. So that's that. We'll carve, you know, do your initials or however you like to do it. And that guy's done. Alright, so then I've got the second one. This one is less dry, but still fairly dry. So you can see if I can still kind of scrape it with my fingernails, but when I rub it, it doesn't smear. It's not wet, right? This one's probably the ideal here. Make sure your wheel head is dry. You don't want to stick this in a puddle of water. And again, visually center it using the circle, and then you can start spinning it. By the way, this pot I threw yesterday. You might recognize it if you watched yesterday. And this was the first one I did that I was trying to use the rib to do, and it didn't turn out very well. It was kind of too wide open, and I don't really like a wide open bowl. I like a more vertical bowl like this, almost like a rice bowl, but they're great for cereal and that kind of stuff. So I did this kind of crimping on 3 sides. I literally just folded. I went like this. I took it and pinched it together, and then I folded it over, like just folded it over. And that's kind of fun. I've never done that before, actually, but I felt like salvaging that bowl. So get it spinning slowly, and again, you can try to do the tap. It's a little harder because I keep getting caught on those pieces. You have to wait for it to come to you. That's probably as good as I'll be able to get it doing that. So I'll go back to this technique. Just again, hold a light pressure on the needle and just, well, it's pretty obvious where I need to move it. Start with the obvious movements, especially using your circles, and then you can kind of double check it. We'll just go right here. Let's see how hopefully you can see it. There's a little notch there. that means it's too far that way, so I need to push it a little bit away and then try again. And if you have a little bit of an uneven pot, but you get a line most of the way around, then that's usually a good indicator. And then again, I like to just kind of visually check it here. When you go like that, or you can even go right by the edge, don't always trust your edge because sometimes it'll be jagged, but you can see that lines up pretty well. Pretty centered. Okay, so I stop the wheel again. I'm gonna take this clay again. It's still fresh because I barely used it. 3 pieces, hold it down, press it into the bat. Not into the side of the pot. That's how you break your pot. And then get it spinning. So before I get it spinning, what we're going to do here is we're going to take a bunch of the weight off right here, and then we're going to do a little bit of an indent here, although this bottom is pretty thin. I threw these pretty thin yesterday. So I'll just take a hair out of there and then and leave a kind of narrow foot right in here. So you're taking away a lot of this weight, which gives the delicacy to the piece, which is nice. And then you're also creating a contour here that kind of lines up with the rest of the pot. So it looks like you took this ring and set it on there. That's sort of the goal. So let's see how it goes. I'm going to brace my hands, and I always start with the little ring here. Just form that ring. And then you can see I'm barely going in because, again, this is a fairly thin pot. Normally you'd leave a thicker bottom and you'd take more off there. And you can see how this looks. I am getting little curly cues, but it's still pretty dry, right? So still a little on the dry side, but that's okay. Not the end of the world. What you really don't want to be doing, though, is making dust. And notice I'm not using the big fat edge, I'm using the sharper edge, because if you use the big fat edge, especially where it's a little dry, your tool is going to catch into the pottery. And then this is going to pull off and go flying off the wheel. And I already had my cat knock this pot over here on the floor this morning. So I'll show you some modifications that one got after the cat messed it up already. Notice how I'm just holding the tool very steady and kind of letting the speed of the wheel and the sharpness of the tool do the work. You can kind of work on your angles a little bit, lower angle, higher angle. Kind of lower is usually good for me because it carves a little better. And this is just your really basic carving tools that you get in the super basic tool sets that have the needle. They have this one, they have this one, they have the little wooden knife, usually a wooden rib, and a round sponge. And that is a great set to start off with, and they're usually no more than 15 bucks. And I'll try to leave a link in the description so you can find one if you need. But you see this, there's a big chunk of clay here, so I'm just going to whittle it away. And now we're getting some nice spirals coming off. You see those? The bat on this portable wheel is a little funky. Not sure I love the wobbliness of it. Hopefully I'll make some bats for this wheel in the future, and I'll try to create a video about that. We'll see how it goes. But see, I'm just taking it off gradually, and we're getting good spirals. They're a little on the dry side, but that's okay. This will dull your tools faster too. And there are some fancy trimming tools you can buy, and those you can generally sharpen. But these, you probably could, but I think it's like aluminum, or it's not a real sharpenable material as far as I know. Okay, so now I'm getting into, let's show you. Now I'm getting into where I have these bumps. If I get too far down there, then that's going to carve it funny. So I'm going to try and just create a transition with that's kind of smooth, hopefully. And just lightly blend it in if I can. And at this point you can be a little more brave and use that side edge. As long as you're carving lightly. You just don't want to use that side edge for like heavy deep carving. You can probably go deeper here. Where it is pretty dry and it's a little wobbly, I'm not trying to get too crazy, honestly. It's nice if you have a foot here that you can grab. Makes it easy to glaze, and it also keeps, if you have a distinct foot, it'll kind of catch your glaze from running too sometimes, which is nice. So let's take a look. So you can see it's trying to have that little kind of contour where this matches up with that. Probably could use some more, but I'm going to go conservative on this so I don't carve through this already thin bottom. Something like that. And then if it is dry like this, you can use a damp finger or a sponge to just give it a little buff. Smooth everything up. I didn't mean to make my finger quite that wet, but that's okay. It probably needed it. There we go. It's kind of nice and smooth now. Okay, and then again, if you want to sign it, maybe I'll sign it over here on the side. And then with these little burrs on here, you want to just leave those until they're dry. And then once this is nice and dry, those will just flick off. But it's worth being patient, because if I try and deal with them now, it'll just smear. Alright, so there's that little guy. See if you can kind of see the profile a little bit better. That's a nice little foot. Alright, and now the big guy. This one was kind of the one that was successful yesterday using that wooden rib. My cat knocked it off and really mangled it, to be honest. It really threw things off. I bent it back into shape, which is not good for it. But it also dinged the rim, so I just went and I continued to ding the rim for kind of a decorative look, and I kind of like it, actually. It's pretty funky. So we're going to go with it. Some of my favorite pots are ones that were starting to be fails, and then I saved them with desperate creativity, and they wound up being my favorite ones. I have a mug that's really misshapen that I just held on to because I didn't want to let it go, and I use it every day. It's one of my favorites. So again, I'm light pressure on the needle tool, and I'm just kind of coming in from the side, trying to make sure that it's all lined up all the way around. And then I'll do the same thing here. See how uneven that is? Because when that cat knocked it off, it really mangled it. But those are pretty close. Maybe I'll go a hair this way and call it good. Get my anchors. You have to have at least 3 points of contact. 4 is okay too. If you're worried, you can use more clay. But really what you want to focus on, what you want to focus on is your technique and your pressure and your use of your tools. And a lot of times it takes very minimal anchoring if you're using the tools right. Another nice reason to use 3 is because if I need to, like say I put this on here and I'm like, oh, I don't remember how thick the center is. Well, shoot. Okay, well I just take off 1. I can slide this out and I can feel, right? And get a sense for where I need to take off weight. Like I have a lot of weight here and a fair amount of weight here, but it's fairly thin right there. So I don't want to, go carving deep again. So that's cool. And then you should be able to slide it back snug in there. And then put this back on and have it be centered again. Although that doesn't look right. No, I think it needs to go tighter in there. Alright, let's do one more check. It's always good to do more checks than less checks. With it being so off-centered, it's a little hard. Yeah, that's okay. And I'm going to try and carve down the unevenness of this. Okay, so let's go. Let's do this. So, step one, mark the inside of where you want that foot to be. And you can see this one's even softer. So it's coming off in nicer, softer curlicues. I'm going to brace my hand. Sometimes it helps to put one hand on top of the wheel or the pot too. But see how I'm bracing my hand? So even with this uneven pot, I'm just basically making it come to me. And then I'll start in the center and I'll carve out the parts that I just kind of marked out, right? And it's a little counterintuitive, but it's helpful to go a little faster and then move slowly with the tool. So what you'll notice is, if I leave this part a little higher, then I can start that curve down the side without worrying about going through the bottom. And maybe it's okay to get this tool out at this point because it's a little easier to get down deeper in here. You just have to find like kind of the right shape of the tool to get into the places that you want. So that kind of starts that curve right down in there. Okay, then I can go back out to the outside here and I can start to take this off. And again, right, it's wobbly, so I've got to just kind of make it come to me. Notice how I'm just bracing the tool. And it's not going to go around consistently for a minute here until I get some of that unevenness carved away. I'm going to step around here so maybe you can see a little better. Maybe you can see those curlicues coming off, because that's the fun part. See, I'm just really thin layers, right? I'm just layering it away. You don't, if you just go in real hard, you're gonna it's gonna grab and you're gonna launch your pot. But this is about the right dryness right here with these nice kind of crunchy curlicues coming off. You could even go a little wetter if you're feeling brave, but then everything's softer and is a little more prone to breaking if you're not gentle and careful. There we go. Now we're getting there. It's always good to stand up straight and maybe stretch your back a little bit. Don't, you don't want to hunch down over. Bend at the hips, right? Use your knees. You got to practice what I preach. That's why I'm telling you, so I remember. That's better. Alright, now we're going to do, now this is where you can use the flat piece a little bit, but again, very carefully. I'm trying to take some of that unevenness off of there. Again, just bracing the tool and kind of making it come to me. You'll notice how all these shavings are building up in here, right? I recommend keeping throwing sessions and trimming sessions separate. because all this is nice and dry right now, it's going to be real easy to clean up. If I have a bunch of wet clay in there and wet clay on my tools or whatever, then you're just, all these shavings go into the wet clay and it just kind of creates this muddy mess, and it's just more trouble than it's worth. So do a dry trimming session and then clean up your wheel with all the dry shavings, and then go back and make your mess. Okay, I'm using this tool because it's got a little smaller surface, so it's not going to be as prone to bucking and bronking. Now we're starting to look pretty good. I'm going to take a little bit down off of here. Look at that. That's it. Now that foot is pretty close to being just kind of nice and centered and even, which is great. That's what we want. So I'm going to try and carve this out a little bit more here and kind of create a little ledge, kind of a shelf here, so you can actually grab underneath the edge of that pot. And it also takes away some of the weight and just makes it nicer. It's helpful to stop every once in a while. So see how this curve is trying to match up to the curve of the bowl. Obviously I need to do a little more here because that's looking kind of rough, but that, yeah, we'll get into that. But we're just matching that curve, so it looks like this foot was just, a ring was just dropped onto your pot. It's kind of cool. Might even do a little more. Bump on one side, I think right here. It's pretty subtle at this point. This is where we can get this flat one out and start to just smooth it. But again, very delicate pressure with this guy because it tends to really want to grab your pot and launch it. And I just like to lightly transition up into there, you know, just to make it smooth. And if you see it getting scratched, if you get a scratch line in there, I just carved it out. But that's because there's a little piece of grog or sand stuck in your tool. It's good to just wipe it off and clear it off, and then you can kind of go back and go at it again. It'll be a little smoother. Anyway, that's about it for smoothing up that. And then sometimes I'll try to take like a, I don't know that I have the tool I want to use for this. I really want to, what I would normally use is a wooden tool, a wooden knife. So I could probably just even use this ballpoint pen. I want to do that little undercut right there, right? So I'm just going to poke in underneath there a little bit. And then I'll carve that out here. Yeah, see, there's that little line from some dirt on the tool. And then we transition that in. There we go. Now we have a little bit of a weight line. Subtle, but it's there. And then this is probably soft enough clay that I should be able to smooth it with just my finger. And get in the side there. And if you get a little chunk like that that sticks back down, you can usually just pick it off. There we go, and I think I'll sign this one on the side too. That's fun. Now let's take a quick look. Yeah, hopefully you can see that all right. Really lightens it up and makes it more delicate. And it's got a nice contour, a nice curve to it now. And that'll sit pretty nicely too. You're able to see that. Yeah, beautiful. Well, that's trimming in a nutshell. That's on a couple of bowls. One other trick is it's always good to test it on a surface. And so like this has a wobble. If you put it on a canvas surface, set it and just rotate it like this to smooth it, to take any wobble out of it. It's not really going to work on this smooth board probably, but it's worth doing on the canvas to make sure you don't have a wobble like this, right? And then just go back and smooth it again. And then at this point, these are dry enough. I can just dry them right side up, or you can dry them upside down, but that's usually how I dry them to get the bottom drier to trim it. Once they're at this stage, you can just dry them however. Thanks for watching. I appreciate you being here, and tomorrow I'll be back with another pottery project outdoors.